My fiancée said, "You're replaceable. Never forget that." When I questioned her loyalty, I said, "Good reminder." Then I replaced myself in a way that destroyed her ego. Her jaw dropped when she saw the changed version of me. I, 29M, never thought 6 words would change my entire life trajectory, but here we are. The woman I'd planned to marry looked me dead in the eye and told me I was replaceable, that I should never forget that fact. What she didn't know was that I'd take her advice more seriously than she ever intended. Let me back up. 3 months ago, everything seemed perfect. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and I thought we were building something real. I worked as a mid-level software engineer, decent salary, but nothing extraordinary. She worked in marketing for a luxury brand, always immaculate, always conscious of image. I should have seen the signs earlier, but love makes you blind to red flags that seem obvious in hindsight. The cracks started showing when she began making comments about my appearance, my career ambition, my social circle. Small jabs disguised as helpful suggestions. I needed to dress better, network more, be more assertive at work. At first, I thought she was trying to help me grow. I was wrong. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I'd come home from work excited to tell her about a potential promotion opportunity. Instead, I found her texting someone, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. When I asked who she was talking to, her expression shifted to something cold and calculating. She told me it was just a friend from work, someone I wouldn't know. But the way she clutched her phone, the defensive tone in her voice, the sudden distance between us on the couch, everything screamed that this was more than friendship. I pressed gently, not accusingly, just asking if everything was okay between us. That's when she said it. Those 6 words that would haunt and ultimately liberate me. She told me I was replaceable, that I should never forget that. The casual cruelty in her voice, the matter-of-fact delivery, hit me like a physical blow. She continued, explaining that I was comfortable, safe, but not exciting. That she had options, and I should remember that before questioning her again. I sat there in stunned silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, I managed to respond with the only words that came to mind. Good reminder. She seemed satisfied with my submission and went back to her phone. I went to bed that night knowing our relationship was over, even if she didn't realize it yet. The next morning, I started planning. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but something far more devastating, complete self-transformation. If I was replaceable, then I'd replace myself with someone she could never have, never control, and never take for granted again. I began with the most obvious changes. I'd been putting off a gym membership for years, always finding excuses. Within a week, I'd signed up for personal training sessions and completely overhauled my diet. I threw myself into fitness with an intensity that surprised even me. The anger, the hurt, the determination, I channeled it all into physical transformation. Simultaneously, I started dressing differently. Gone were the safe, boring clothes she'd always criticized. I researched men's fashion, invested in a complete wardrobe overhaul, and learned about style and presentation. Every purchase was deliberate, every choice designed to project confidence and success. But the physical changes were just the beginning. I realized that her criticism about my career ambition, while delivered cruelly, wasn't entirely wrong. I'd become complacent, coasting instead of pushing forward. I started studying for industry certifications, networking aggressively, and applying for senior positions at other companies. Throughout this period, she noticed the changes but seemed to interpret them as my response to her ultimatum. She became more affectionate, more attentive, probably thinking she'd successfully motivated me to become the man she wanted. Little did she know I was becoming someone entirely different, someone who would never again accept being treated as a backup option. The gym became my sanctuary. 6 days a week, 2 hours each session. The physical transformation was dramatic. Within 2 months, I'd lost 20 pounds of fat and gained visible muscle definition. But more importantly, the mental transformation was complete. Every rep, every mile on the treadmill, every drop of sweat was washing away the person who'd accepted being told he was replaceable. My confidence soared as my body changed. Colleagues at work noticed. Random people started treating me differently. I carried myself differently, spoke with more authority, and projected an energy I'd never possessed before. The promotion I'd mentioned that Tuesday night, I got it, along with a significant salary increase. But I wasn't done. I started taking dance lessons, learning photography, reading voraciously about subjects I'd always found interesting but never pursued. I was becoming the most interesting version of myself, not for her, but despite her. She began asking questions about my schedule, why I was always at the gym or out learning something new. I kept my answers vague, non-committal. When she suggested we spend more time together, I told her I was busy working on myself, taking her advice about self-improvement seriously. The irony wasn't lost on me that as I became more attractive and successful, I found myself less and less attracted to her. Her beauty, which had once captivated me, seemed shallow compared to the depth I was discovering in myself. Her cruel comments, which had once hurt, now seemed like the desperate attempts of someone threatened by growth she couldn't control. 3 months after that Tuesday night, I was essentially a different person. The physical transformation was obvious. I'd gained 15 pounds of muscle, developed a jawline that turned heads, and carried myself with genuine confidence. But the real change was internal. I no longer needed her validation or approval. I no longer feared losing her because I'd already lost the version of myself that depended on her acceptance. That's when I made my final move. I told her we needed to talk and suggested we meet at the upscale restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary dinner. I chose the location deliberately. Somewhere public, somewhere with significance, somewhere she'd feel comfortable and in control. I arrived first and waited at our usual table. When she walked in, scanning the restaurant for me, her eyes passed right over where I was sitting. It took her a full 30 seconds to recognize the man she'd been living with for months. The double take was worth every hour I'd spent transforming myself. She approached the table with an expression I'd never seen before, uncertainty mixed with something that looked almost like intimidation. I stood to greet her, and I could see her mentally cataloging the changes. The perfectly fitted suit, the confident posture, the way other women in the restaurant were glancing in my direction. We sat down, and she immediately started talking about how amazing I looked, how proud she was of my transformation, how she'd always known I had this potential. She was trying to take credit for my metamorphosis, positioning herself as the catalyst for my improvement. I let her talk for a while, nodding politely, before I interrupted her mid-sentence. I thanked her for the reminder about being replaceable and told her I'd taken her advice to heart. The confusion in her eyes was immediate and obvious. I explained that she was absolutely right. I had been replaceable. The old version of me, the one who accepted being treated poorly, who settled for someone who saw him as a backup option, who didn't value himself enough to demand respect, that person was indeed replaceable. So I'd replaced him. I told her about the job offers I'd been receiving, the attention from other women, the opportunities opening up because I'd finally learned to value myself. I thanked her again for showing me that I deserved better than someone who would threaten me with replacement instead of working together to build something stronger. The realization hit her like a freight train. She'd expected this dinner to be about reconciliation, about me proving myself worthy of her continued attention. Instead, she was listening to someone who no longer needed her approval, who had become the kind of man she'd always claimed to want, but never thought I could become. She started backtracking immediately, saying she'd never meant those words the way they sounded, that she loved me exactly as I was, that she'd only been trying to motivate me. The desperation in her voice was palpable, and for the first time in our relationship, I held all the power. I remained calm and respectful throughout her explanation, but I didn't waver in my decision. I told her that she'd given me a gift that night 3 months ago, the gift of clarity. She'd shown me exactly how she viewed our relationship, and I'd finally learned to see myself through my own eyes instead of hers. When she asked if there was anything she could do to fix things between us, I told her the truth. There was nothing to fix because I was no longer the person she'd been in a relationship with. That person was gone, replaced by someone who wouldn't accept being anyone's backup plan. The restaurant conversation lasted another hour, with her cycling through anger, bargaining, and desperation. She accused me of changing for other people, of becoming arrogant, of throwing away 4 years over a single comment. I listened to it all with the detachment of someone who'd already processed these emotions and moved beyond them. As we prepared to leave, she made one final attempt to regain control. She told me I'd never find anyone better than her, that this new version of me was artificial and unsustainable, that I'd come crawling back within a month. I smiled and thanked her again for the motivation. Update 1. That was 6 weeks ago. The aftermath has been more dramatic than I anticipated, but also more validating. She's contacted me 17 times since that dinner, calls, texts, social media messages, even showing up at my gym once. Each interaction has confirmed that I made the right decision. The most telling moment came 2 weeks after our breakup dinner. She'd been posting cryptic social media messages about karma and people showing their true colors. Then she started posting photos with the coworker she'd been texting that Tuesday night. Within a week, those posts stopped, and I heard through mutual friends that he'd ghosted her after 3 dates. Apparently, she'd been so confident in her ability to upgrade that she'd already been planning her next relationship before ending ours. The irony of her being replaced by someone who saw her exactly the way she'd seen me wasn't lost on anyone in our social circle. But the real validation came from unexpected sources. My sister, who'd never liked my ex but had been polite for my sake, told me she'd been waiting years for me to see what everyone else could see. My best friend admitted he'd been concerned about how she treated me, but hadn't known how to bring it up. The professional changes have been equally dramatic. The confidence I'd built in the gym translated directly to my work performance. I've been approached by 3 different companies with offers significantly better than my current position. The promotion I'd gotten was just the beginning. Suddenly, I was seen as leadership material, someone with executive potential. The physical transformation continued as well. What started as anger-fueled motivation had become a genuine lifestyle change. I discovered that I actually enjoyed pushing my physical limits, learning new skills, challenging myself in ways I'd never attempted before. The man in the mirror was almost unrecognizable from the one who'd sat on that couch 3 months earlier. Dating wasn't something I'd planned to jump into immediately, but opportunities presented themselves naturally. The difference in how women interacted with me was startling. Where I'd once felt grateful for female attention, I now felt entitled to respect and genuine interest. It was a paradigm shift that affected every aspect of my social life. Update 2. 3 months post-breakup, and the transformation continues to compound. I accepted a senior developer position at a tech startup, nearly doubling my previous salary. The interview process itself was a testament to how much had changed. I walked into that room knowing I was exactly what they needed, not hoping they might consider me. The ex-fiancée situation has taken some interesting turns. Apparently, her social media presence became increasingly desperate after her rebound relationship failed. According to mutual friends, she'd been telling people that I'd had some kind of breakdown, that my transformation was unhealthy and obsessive. The narrative she was spinning fell apart when we ran into each other at a mutual friend's birthday party last weekend. I'd been dreading this moment, not because I had feelings for her, but because I wasn't sure how I'd react to seeing her again in a social setting. When she walked into the party and saw me, her entire demeanor changed. I was talking with a group of friends, genuinely enjoying myself, when I noticed her staring from across the room. The woman who'd once commanded every room she entered now looked small and uncertain. She approached our group after about an hour, clearly having worked up the courage. She looked good. She'd always been beautiful, but there was something different about her energy. The confidence that had once intimidated me was replaced by something that looked almost like insecurity. She inserted herself into our conversation, trying to establish some kind of familiarity or connection. When someone mentioned my new job, she tried to take credit for inspiring my career advancement. The group's reaction was immediate and uncomfortable. Everyone knew the real story of our breakup. The most revealing moment came when she pulled me aside privately. She told me she'd made a mistake, that she'd been going through a difficult time and had taken it out on me unfairly. She said she'd been thinking about us constantly and wanted to know if there was any chance we could try again. I looked at this woman who'd once held so much power over my emotional well-being and felt nothing but mild sympathy. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that we'd both moved on to become different people. The person she'd been in a relationship with no longer existed, and the person I'd become wasn't compatible with who she was. She asked what she could do to prove she'd changed, and I realized she still didn't understand. She was still thinking in terms of transactions and proving worth, still operating from the same mindset that had led her to tell me I was replaceable. I explained that this wasn't about proving anything. We were simply incompatible now. The conversation ended with her in tears, which I hadn't expected or intended. Despite everything she'd put me through, I took no pleasure in her pain. I'd found peace in my transformation, not revenge, and seeing her struggle didn't add to my happiness. Update 3. 6 months after that Tuesday night, and I can confidently say I'm living a completely different life. The man who accepted being told he was replaceable is truly gone, replaced by someone who knows his worth and refuses to settle for less than he deserves. The career trajectory has been remarkable. The startup where I'm working just secured major funding, and I've been promoted to lead developer with equity options. Financial security, which had once seemed like a distant goal, is now my reality. More importantly, I genuinely love the work and the challenges it presents. The relationship front has been equally positive, though in ways I didn't expect. I've been dating, but selectively. The transformation taught me to value quality over availability, compatibility over convenience. I'm no longer grateful for attention. I'm thoughtful about who deserves mine. I met someone 3 weeks ago who embodies everything I now understand I want in a partner. She's intelligent, ambitious, and treats our connection as a collaboration rather than a competition. Most importantly, she sees my worth without needing me to prove it constantly. The ex made one final attempt at contact 2 weeks ago. She sent a long message explaining that she'd been in therapy, working on herself, and understanding how poorly she'd treated me. She acknowledged that telling me I was replaceable was cruel and unfounded. She asked if we could meet for coffee, not to reconcile, but so she could apologize properly. I thought about it for several days before responding. Part of me was curious about this supposed growth, but a larger part recognized that her need for closure wasn't my responsibility. I sent a brief response wishing her well in her personal development, but declining the meeting. Some chapters are better left closed. The most unexpected aspect of this entire experience has been the ripple effects on other relationships. Friends have commented that I seem happier, more confident, more present. My family has noticed the change too. I'm more assertive in setting boundaries, more willing to speak up for myself, more comfortable taking up space. I've also become something of an inspiration to other people in similar situations. 3 different friends have reached out over the past few months, sharing stories of relationships where they felt undervalued or taken for granted. Being able to offer perspective and encouragement has been unexpectedly fulfilling. The physical transformation plateaued months ago, but the mental and emotional growth continues. I've discovered interests and capabilities I never knew I possessed. I'm learning Spanish, training for a marathon, and considering graduate school options. The world feels full of possibilities in a way it never did before. Looking back, I can see that she was right about one thing. I was replaceable, but not in the way she meant. I was replaceable because I wasn't living up to my potential, wasn't demanding the respect I deserved, wasn't becoming the person I was capable of being. Her cruelty gave me the push I needed to replace the worst version of myself with the best. The man she discarded as insufficient has become someone she could never have, never control, and never take for granted. And the beautiful irony is that this transformation had nothing to do with proving anything to her. It was about finally proving something to myself. The engagement ring I'd bought her sits in my sock drawer, a reminder of how close I came to settling for someone who saw me as expendable. Sometimes I look at it and marvel at the bullet I dodged. Other times, I'm actually grateful for the lesson it represents. She taught me that everyone is replaceable if they don't value themselves enough to demand better. The difference is that now I understand my worth, and I'll never again accept being anyone's backup plan. In trying to diminish me, she accidentally set me free. The man who walked into that restaurant 6 months ago to break up with his fiancée was indeed replaceable. The man who walked out is irreplaceable, at least to himself. And that's made all the difference.